They were on the bathroom sink. Small, gold, twisted hoops. The kind you see in commercials where the woman tilts her head and smiles like she's hiding a secret. Only these weren't hiding anything. They were telling me something. Loud and clear. My wife, let's call her Darla, never wore gold. Ever. She said it clashed with her undertone, whatever that means. She was strictly silver, platinum, or cool-toned minimalist. But there they were. Gold. Still warm from being taken off. I stared at them for a long time. Longer than any man should stare at an earring. I picked them up. Felt the weight. Smelled the faint trace of her perfume on them. And I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it wasn't surprising. Not anymore. Darla had been slipping. Not tripping or stumbling. No, slipping. Out of our marriage. Out of our conversations. Out of our routines. Like water through a cracked pipe. The kind of slipping you only notice when the damage is already done. It wasn't the earrings that hurt. It was the silence that came with them. You see, I already knew about him. About Micah. I found out 3 weeks earlier. It wasn't a dramatic discovery. No lipstick on the collar. No mysterious text at 2 a.m. No strange receipts. It was a joke. An inside joke. She told it during a video call with her sister. I was in the next room, fixing a jammed drawer. She laughed and said, "Well, Micah says I should stop pretending I like kale just to look healthy around my husband." And then she laughed. The kind of laugh you save for someone who knows you deeply. Except I didn't know that about her. Because she never ate kale with me. She hated it. From that moment on, the puzzle started assembling itself. Every business dinner. Every late-night strategy call. The weekends she needed space to journal. And now, the earrings. I didn't confront her. Not immediately. I wasn't ready for the lie she'd wrap in tears. I wasn't strong enough to sit across from her at the dining table, listening to her pretend it wasn't what it was. So I waited. Like a coward. Like a man who wanted proof so absolute it couldn't be spun. And then I got it. Her company's end-of-quarter gala was coming up. A formal event. Big venue. Open bar. Plus one's welcome. She assumed I wouldn't go. Said I hated those things. That I should take a night to decompress. So I RSVP'd and said nothing. But I didn't plan to go alone. Because while Darla was off rehearsing speeches in front of the mirror, I was talking to Micah's wife. A woman I hadn't known existed until I scrolled deep enough through a tagged photo on his social media. Her name was Lennox. Soft voice. No theatrics. Just pain wrapped in clarity. I told her everything. She didn't cry. She just asked one thing. Do you want to walk in holding my hand? Or should we just make eye contact and let them break first? We went with the hand. And when Darla saw me at the gala, suit pressed, Lennox beside me, eyes locked on her from across the dance floor, she blinked 3 times. Just 3. Before everything started to fall apart. I could feel Lennox's pulse through her palm as we stepped onto the marble floor of the Winslow Hall ballroom. Her grip was steady, her posture effortless, but her silence said everything. She wasn't doing this for drama. She wasn't after revenge. She just wanted the truth exposed. Just like me. The room was dressed in crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, and men in suits trying too hard. Darla always thrived in this setting. These glittering events where everyone smiled too wide and said too little. She called them networking, but to me they always felt like stage plays where she was the lead and I was the understudy who didn't get the script. I spotted her before she saw us. She stood near the open bar in a silver dress I'd never seen before. Strapless. Elegant. Expensive. Micah was beside her, hand casually grazing her lower back as he ordered 2 drinks. He whispered something, and she tilted her head back in a way I hadn't seen in years. That uninhibited laugh she used to reserve for road trips and pillow fights and midnight snacks on the kitchen floor. That laugh had once been mine. And in that moment, standing in a room of strangers with Lennox at my side, it hit me with such terrifying clarity. She had already left me. Long before the earrings, the kale jokes, or the gala. She had been slipping away for months, maybe years, and I had watched it happen like a movie I couldn't pause. Lennox leaned in and said, "They haven't seen us yet." I nodded, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were welded to the floor. What was I even doing? This wasn't me. I was the guy who said, "Let's talk about it." The guy who forgave, who bent backward just to keep things peaceful. I wasn't built for public drama. But that night, something in me snapped. Not in anger, in resolve. I looked at Lennox and said, "Let's go say hi." We crossed the room like we belonged there. I held her hand not like a date, but like an accomplice. As we got within 10 feet, Darla turned. Her eyes met mine. For a split second, she didn't register what she was seeing. Then she noticed the hand I was holding. Then she recognized Lennox. Her expression didn't crumble, it shattered. It was like watching a statue fall off a pedestal in slow motion. She tried to speak. Her lips parted. Her drink slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the polished floor. Conversations around us paused, like a scratched vinyl record. People turned. Whispers started. The sound of heels on marble echoed like distant thunder. Micah's face twisted, not in guilt, not even in confusion. In panic. He knew what this meant. That we hadn't just come to watch. We had come to show. Darla, I said calmly, almost too calmly. You remember Lennox, don't you? Lennox didn't blink. Oh, we've never officially met. But I've seen plenty of you. In her texts. In her photos. In her bed, I imagine. The silence was nuclear. Micah stepped forward, putting a hand on Darla's shoulder, like that would shield her from what was unfolding. You need to leave, he told Lennox. His voice was firm but cracked on the word need. Lennox just smiled. Not a cruel smile, not a smug one. Just sad. We will leave, I replied. But not before everyone here sees who the keynote speaker and the project lead really are behind closed doors. Gasps. Real, audible gasps. Darla tried to salvage it. This is private. This isn't the place. No, I said, this is exactly the place. You chose to build your new relationship in shadows. I'm just flipping on the lights. She reached for me, not out of affection, but desperation. I stepped back. For once, I didn't offer comfort. I didn't fold. I didn't bend. We turned and left. Just like that. But the fallout was only beginning. Because what none of them knew, not even Lennox, was that I hadn't just shown up for a dramatic reveal. I had recorded something the night before. Something that would unravel the rest of her carefully constructed world. Something I had emailed to the event's organizer. With a time-stamped subject line. At exactly 9 p.m., just as we were walking out the front doors. It would start playing on the projection screen behind the gala's main stage. And it was already 8:58. We were just past the lobby when the first message alert popped on my phone. A text from someone I barely knew. A guy named Corbin who once co-hosted a game night at our house and had apparently also RSVP'd to the gala. The text read, Dude, you planned this? Holy hell. Everyone's watching it right now. I stopped. My thumb hovered over the screen, pulse pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Lennox peeked over, her expression unreadable, and I could tell she didn't fully grasp what was happening yet. I hadn't told her about the file. I didn't tell anyone, actually, because part of me still hadn't decided if I would follow through. But I had set the timer, hadn't I? And now it was live. Back in the ballroom, projected onto the massive screen that usually displayed company logos and slideshow charts, played a simple black background with white text. Presented by the spouses of Darla Greaves and Micah Langston. Then it cut to the audio. No images. No faces. Just voices. Hers. His. Their voices, filtered through the cracked phone mic I had left recording on the kitchen counter during one of Darla's phone calls when she thought I was mowing the lawn. The file was only 4 minutes long. Just long enough for them to share things like, I don't think he'll ever know. He's too slow to figure anything out. Or, if we're careful, we can keep both marriages and still see each other. He worships me. He'll never question it. I didn't include anything explicit, just enough truth to unmask their careful little performance. I'd edited it cleanly. No bitterness, no commentary, no manipulation. Just them, unfiltered. As Lennox and I waited for the valet to bring her car around, her phone began buzzing too. Then again, and again, people were texting her. Screenshots, audio clips, a short video someone had filmed with their phone showing the guests in the ballroom, frozen, wide-eyed, silent, like deer watching a wildfire cross the highway. Then she looked up at me and whispered, What did you do? I swallowed, trying to find the line between guilt and liberation. I gave the truth a microphone, I said. That's all. She didn't speak for a moment, just nodded slowly and looked out at the valet circle, where the line of cars now seemed endless, headlights blinking like Morse code against the evening air. Inside the ballroom, chaos had finally caught up with them. One guest, someone from HR, apparently, texted Lennox a photo. Darla standing on stage, pleading with the organizer to shut it off, while Micah stood in the corner, face buried in his hands. The audio had finished by then, but the damage was irreversible. Their names were already trending in the company Slack channels. Word was spreading like gasoline finding a spark. We got into her car, a modest Toyota, nothing flashy, and just sat there in silence. I should feel triumphant, Lennox said finally, her hands gripping the wheel, knuckles white. But I just feel empty. I nodded. Yeah, I murmured. Me too. Because revenge, even when justified, doesn't come with a parade. It doesn't heal. It doesn't bring back the trust or the moments or the version of yourself that believed everything would work out if you just loved hard enough. We sat there for nearly 15 minutes. She cried. I didn't. I'd already done my crying. Mine had come in quiet moments, like when I stood in the laundry room holding one of her sweaters, or when I found our anniversary card tucked behind the cereal box, unopened. Eventually, Lennox asked me, so what now? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. The unraveling had only just begun. Darla hadn't called or texted. Neither had Micah. But the weight of what I'd done would eventually land in my inbox, my doorstep, my life. I had lit a fuse, and the explosion hadn't finished echoing. But for the first time in months, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't waiting for the next lie. I wasn't second-guessing myself in the shower. I was finally breathing, even if it stung. 3 days passed before I saw her again. 3 days without a single text, no call, no cryptic emoji. Nothing. Just silence. The kind of silence that wraps around your brain like wet wool, suffocating and dull. I kept thinking, maybe she was going to try and twist the narrative. Maybe she'd show up angry or crying or unapologetic. I'd played out 100 versions of that confrontation in my head. But when she finally walked through the door, it wasn't any of those things. It was worse. It was calm. She came in around 8 p.m., quietly closing the door behind her like she didn't want to disturb anything. She had a duffel bag slung over her shoulder and her phone clutched in one hand like it was a lifeline. Her eyes were puffy, face pale, lips pressed so tight they looked like they might disappear. She didn't even glance at me. She walked straight past me, past the living room where I sat on the edge of the couch, TV off, lights dimmed, my laptop open with a blank document on the screen. I hadn't written anything. I just wanted something in front of me, something that pretended to occupy my mind. I heard the sound of the zipper in the bedroom, then drawers, then the closet. I stood up and followed her. She was packing. Where are you going? I asked, and my voice cracked, not from sadness, but exhaustion. That hollowed-out tone that comes after all the shouting is done. She didn't answer at first, just kept folding her clothes with robotic precision. She placed a blouse I'd bought her for her birthday into the bag without even looking at it. I figured you wouldn't want me here, she finally said. Her voice wasn't defiant. It wasn't remorseful either. It was flat, paper thin. I stared at her back, the way her spine stiffened like she was bracing for impact that never came. You figured right, I said. But you don't just disappear for days and then casually show up to pack like this is a hotel checkout. That got her attention. She turned around, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of the woman I once knew. Or maybe it was just guilt pretending to be her. You embarrassed me, she said quietly. I laughed. Actually laughed. A bitter, sharp sound that startled even me. You cheated. I told the truth. Embarrassment was the minimum. She clenched her jaw, trying to hold back the flood. But something broke. You humiliated me in front of my coworkers. My boss. My entire company saw it. You humiliated us the moment you decided someone else's husband was more exciting than the life we built. There was a pause. Heavy. Dense. Then she said something I'll never forget. I didn't think you had it in you. I blinked. To what? Stand up for myself? No, she said. To expose me. You were always so passive. I should have felt triumphant. I should have basked in that admission. But instead, I just felt cold. Because she was right. I had spent years minimizing my needs, my instincts, my voice. Hoping that if I made things easy, she'd stay. That if I was kind enough, supportive enough, quiet enough, I'd be enough. But nothing you do is ever enough for someone who's already decided they want more. I was passive, I admitted. But you mistook mercy for weakness. You forgot that I was watching even when I said nothing. And when you laughed at me behind my back, I didn't stop loving you. I just stopped waiting for you to love me back. Her eyes filled then. But I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. That part of me was gone. She zipped her bag and stood there like she wanted me to say something else. Something like, stay, or we can fix this, or even I hate you. But I didn't. I walked to the door, opened it, and stood aside. She paused on the threshold, glancing back like she expected one last blow. Instead, I whispered, this door used to open to our home. Now it's just a doorway to someone else's story. Yours. And I don't want to read it anymore. She stepped out, and I closed it behind her. Not with anger, not with relief, but with finality. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever known. Not peaceful, not healing, just thick. It lingered in the rooms like smoke after a fire. Faint, toxic, and impossible to ignore. I walked through the house the next morning like I didn't live there, noticing details I'd never seen before. A coffee stain on the windowsill. A half-burned candle in the guest bathroom. Her bobby pins still scattered in the drawer I hadn't dared open in years. Everything around me whispered her name, even though she was gone. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she was doing, where she was staying, whether Micah's wife had kicked him out too, whether they were now together, liberated, exposed, and free to be what they'd been in secret. I wondered if she cried after leaving. If she'd opened the door to his apartment with that same tight-lipped expression and collapsed into his arms, pretending like I was some villain who twisted the truth, instead of just revealing it. Around 6 a.m., I finally got up, not out of energy, but out of restlessness. I sat on the kitchen floor with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold and stared at the fridge door. There, stuck under a tiny magnet shaped like a duck, was a photo from last fall. It was us, standing at the edge of a trail in Colorado. She had her arms around my shoulders, beaming. I looked tired, but I was smiling. I remembered that day. I'd surprised her with a weekend getaway. She said she hadn't felt that happy in months. I took the photo down and flipped it over. She'd written something on the back. Thank you for reminding me what home feels like. I nearly ripped it in half, but I didn't. I just slid it into the junk drawer, next to the batteries and expired coupons. Right where it belonged. I didn't hear from her for 2 more days. Then she emailed me. Not a call, not a text. An email, like a business transaction. The subject line was simply, request to discuss logistics. It read, Deacon, I think we should discuss how to proceed with the property, the accounts, and any remaining personal items. I'm staying with a friend until I sort things out. Please let me know if you're available to meet next week. Darla. No apology. No explanation. Just a neat, detached memo about dismantling a life. I read it 5 times. My first impulse was to delete it. The second was to reply with something brutal. I did neither. Instead, I drafted a response and saved it as a draft. I've done that often, write messages I'll never send. I guess it's how I purge the poison. I spent that day taking down photos from the hallway. Not out of bitterness. I just couldn't look at them anymore without feeling like I was watching a documentary about someone else's life. I boxed them up, one by one. Then came the books she loved but never finished, the throw pillows she insisted we buy even though they were just decorative, and the wine glasses we used maybe 3 times. Every object had become a relic. By the evening, I felt like I was floating through someone else's house. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister, Camille. She lived 2 states over. We used to be close, but like most things, time and marriage and distance got in the way. She answered on the second ring, voice groggy from sleep or motherhood, maybe both. Deacon? She asked, cautious. And then I broke. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. I just told her I needed to get away. That I needed space. That I needed to feel like someone remembered who I was before I became this ghost of a man, floating between rooms full of memories. Come stay, she said without hesitation. I'll make the guest room ready. I packed a bag that night. Only essentials. Left the rest behind. I didn't leave a note for Darla. There was nothing more to say. But as I closed the door behind me and locked it, something strange happened. I looked back through the window and realized the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Not even a little. It was hers. Or maybe theirs. Or maybe no one's. I was ready to let it go. I drove through the night. No music. No GPS. Just miles of asphalt and a mind full of echoes. And somewhere, between mile marker 212 and the empty diner off Route 7, I whispered to myself the words I never thought I'd say. I don't want her back. Camille greeted me at her door with that same crooked smile she's had since childhood, the one she used to flash at our parents whenever she was about to get away with something. But this time, there was no mischief behind it, just worry. The kind of worry siblings carry for each other in silence for years until it finally spills out under a porch light. She didn't ask many questions, not at first. Just hugged me and said, "You look thinner," before pulling me inside and handing me a mug of tea I didn't ask for. Her house smelled like cinnamon and something baking. Normal, comforting things. Things I hadn't realized I missed until I stood there, shoes still on, holding a duffel bag and blinking at the normalcy like it was a foreign language. Her kids were asleep. Her husband, Grant, gave me a nod and a solid pat on the back, not the kind that says, "Welcome," but the kind that says, "I know, man. You're safe here." I barely made it through a bowl of soup before I crashed in the guest room. That night, I slept for 9 hours straight. No dreams, no jolts awake, just an uninterrupted stretch of darkness that felt like permission to exist again. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of pancakes sizzling and cartoons in the background. Camille had set a place for me at the table, like I belonged there. It was strange, being in a home that had its own rhythm, its own warmth, its own messes and routines that had nothing to do with betrayal or silence or half-packed bags. For the first few days, I didn't talk about Darla. I helped Grant with small repairs around the house, fixed a broken hinge, rewired a loose light switch, played board games with the kids, and got destroyed at every round of Uno. I was existing in a borrowed peace, like a squatter in someone else's happiness. And yet, I started breathing deeper. I started sleeping longer. I even laughed. Genuinely laughed. At nothing. At everything. It felt strange. My face wasn't used to the movement. But that peace didn't last long. Because one evening, just after dinner, Camille came into the guest room with her laptop in hand. She didn't say anything, just turned the screen toward me. It was a video, the one from the gala. Someone had uploaded it to a gossip blog that tracked corporate meltdowns and PR disasters. There were no names, but the captions were ruthless. Anonymous couple caught in workplace affair, and spouse's crash party in viral exposé. It had over 300,000 views. I watched, heart thudding, as the clip showed the exact moment Darla dropped her drink. The way she looked at me. At Lennox, the horror in her eyes. And then it cut to the audio file I'd submitted. Her voice. Micah's. Their words. Our secrets. I didn't even realize my hands were shaking until Camille touched my arm. "I thought you should see it," she said gently, "before someone else sends it to you." I nodded, but my stomach was already turning. Later that night, I checked my email. 3 unread messages. One from my lawyer, someone I'd barely spoken to since the wedding, now helping me draft separation terms. One from Lennox. And one from Darla. I opened hers last. "Deacon, I saw the video. I know what people are saying. I don't care about the gossip. But I care that you did this. You turned our personal pain into a public mess. I don't even recognize you anymore. I wanted to hate you for it. But I realized something worse. You finally did something bold, and it wasn't for me. I'm sorry. Not for being caught. For being careless with someone who would have forgiven me if I'd only asked for grace. I hope you find peace in whatever this has become. Darla." I read it twice. Then again. And I felt nothing. Not rage. Not sorrow. Not relief. Just absence. Like she'd been a character in a book I once loved and forgot on a park bench. I replied with a single line. "I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it so I'd stop hurting myself." And I hit send. That night, I took a walk through Camille's neighborhood. Just a quiet stroll past picket fences and porch lights, pretending, for a moment, that I was someone else. Someone who hadn't had his life ripped apart in a ballroom full of strangers. Someone who wasn't haunted by the way his wife had laughed with another man while wearing a dress he'd bought her. I didn't feel healed, but I felt aware. And maybe that was enough for now. 2 weeks passed. Enough time for the wound to scab, but not enough to stop it from bleeding when touched. I had settled into Camille's guest room like it was mine. Unpacked a little, started cooking meals to feel useful, even fixed their leaky sink without being asked. But beneath all the domestic distractions, something kept crawling back into my head like static you can't quite tune out. Her voice. Her apology. Her sentence about how she didn't recognize me anymore. As if the man I used to be, the one she quietly dismantled, was more authentic than the one who finally stood up. I didn't reply to her last message. I didn't check her social media. I didn't ask mutual friends for updates. I was done searching for new ways to hurt myself. Or at least, I told myself that. But the past didn't care about what I wanted. It showed up anyway. I had just finished mowing Camille's lawn when I saw a silver car parked 2 houses down. I wouldn't have thought twice about it if it hadn't been running, just sitting there idling with someone inside. I squinted against the late afternoon sun and stepped closer. It was Darla. She was in the driver's seat, both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead like she was rehearsing something. A conversation. A monologue. An apology too big for text. I froze. Part of me wanted to turn around and pretend I hadn't seen her. Another part, the same one that stayed silent all those years, was screaming for me to finally finish this. I walked down the sidewalk, slow and deliberate, not giving her the dignity of surprise. She saw me coming. Her eyes widened just slightly, then narrowed like she'd been caught unprepared despite sitting there for God knows how long. I stopped beside her window. She didn't roll it down. I knocked. Once. The glass slid down. "Hi," she said. It was the softest hi I'd ever heard from her. It wasn't coy or defensive, just tired. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She blinked, as if she hadn't prepared for the question. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was driving and I ended up here. I wasn't even sure I'd get out of the car." "You shouldn't have come," I said. My voice didn't crack this time. It didn't shake. It was as steady as the truth. "I know." A pause settled between us. Cars drove by. A dog barked. Somewhere in the distance, Camille's wind chime clinked in the breeze. "I miss you," she said. "Not the last few weeks. You. Us. The version of us that worked." "That version died when you made me your fool," I replied, calmly. "You don't miss me. You miss what I gave you, unearned forgiveness." She swallowed hard. Her eyes glassed over, but no tears came. "You're different now. I'm clearer now. Is that why you humiliated me?" "No," I said. "I humiliated both of us. But the difference is, I was willing to live with the truth. You weren't." She stared at the dashboard like she was trying to fold herself into the airbag. "I'm not with him anymore," she whispered. I didn't ask. She looked at me then, really looked. And I could tell she wasn't there to fix anything. She just wanted closure. Or maybe permission to feel like she wasn't the villain anymore. But I couldn't give her that. I wouldn't. "You have no idea how heavy it's been," she said. "Losing you, the apartment, everything unraveling in public. That weight you're feeling?" I said. "It's called consequence. It's what happens when truth is finally louder than the stories we tell ourselves." She nodded, barely. I thought maybe, after time, we could talk. Start over. Just as people. "We are talking," I said. "And I'm not angry anymore. But starting over isn't healing. It's pretending." She closed her eyes. For a second, I wondered if she'd cry. But instead, she just said, "Okay," and rolled up the window. I watched as she drove off without looking back. And that's when I realized something I hadn't until that moment. I no longer wanted her to hurt. I didn't need her to suffer. I just didn't want to carry her anymore. That night, I packed my things. Not because Camille asked, but because I knew it was time. The next chapter wasn't waiting here. It was out there, somewhere I hadn't been yet, somewhere she didn't belong. I wrote one final thing in my notebook before I left her house. Closure doesn't come from what they say. It comes from what you stop needing them to say. The road was unfamiliar. Not metaphorically, I mean literally. I took turns without thinking, exited highways on instinct, let the GPS reroute until it gave up and said recalculating, like it, too, was trying to figure out who I was now. I ended up in a small town 2 hours north, surrounded by pine trees and late summer air that smelled like wood smoke and second chances. There was a quiet inn on the edge of a lake. Nothing fancy, just a porch, a view, and enough space between cabins to feel like you could hear your own thoughts again. I checked in without a plan. Told the owner I'd stay a few days. I stayed 3 weeks. Those weeks were uneventful in the best possible way. I hiked a little, read old paperbacks I found in a donation bin, cooked my own meals, talked to strangers in diners about nothing important. There was no timeline, no pressure to fix anything. I had no one to impress. And for once in my life, I didn't feel small because of that. I felt free. I didn't think about Darla much. Not in the desperate, knotted stomach way I used to. I thought of her like a dream I'd had once. Vivid, chaotic, and distant. The kind you remember flashes of, but no longer live inside. One morning, I woke up before sunrise and walked down to the water. The lake was still. A mirror. I stood there for a long time, watching the light creep in over the trees. And I realized something simple, something quiet, something true. I didn't need to reclaim my old life. I just needed to stop mourning it. I didn't go back to the house we shared. I sold my share. Let her handle the rest. I didn't read any more of her messages. I archived them. I didn't chase closure anymore. I chose peace instead. Eventually, I found a small place in a nearby town. Nothing special, just mine. I built new routines. Slower ones. Honest ones. I picked up woodworking. Not professionally, just with my hands, shaping things that didn't lie to me. And slowly, the parts of me that had been dulled and hollowed and dismissed began to return, not as they were, but as they should have been all along. And one day, a woman smiled at me in a bookstore. I smiled back, not with hope or fear or pressure, just with curiosity, the kind that starts when the past stops chasing you. So if you're still here, listening, watching, wondering, know this: the end of something painful isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to no longer carry what broke you. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't making them regret what they lost. It's becoming someone who no longer waits to be chosen. Thanks for staying through the whole journey. If this story struck a chord with you, I'd love to hear in the comments. Was there a moment in this story that reminded you of your own life? Or maybe a time you finally let something, or someone, go for good? Let's talk about it below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories just like this. You're watching Reddit Confessions, where the truth doesn't hide.